Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to talk about, is the narcissist abusing phone time with the kids? Now, I've done a lot of videos about the fact that I believe it's best for the children if you aren't trying to do calls or communicate with them very much on the other parent's parenting time. But I have had a couple requests where people have asked me, can you please talk about more from the perspective when the other parent is intrusive? Right? When they're overstepping, we know that narcissists don't, you know, they do whatever they want to do. They don't just comply with whatever they think you want. And so they a lot of times will sort of use the children as a tool to kind of reach their tentacles through into your world, right? And that can be really frustrating and it can be really difficult to deal with. As I dive into this topic, as always, let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. I've kind of been on my soapbox lately about the fact that 70% of you watching this are not subscribed. Please subscribe. That helps me. I help you by producing content. You help me by subscribing. Okay, so please do that. Now, when the narcissist is communicating with the kids, there's a few things to think about here. The first thing I would say is, do we have orders in place? Are there court orders? This is usually always my fallback when anybody has a question for me at all. Should I do this? Should I do this? Can I do this? Can I do that? Do you have court orders? I mean, that's the first thing we go to, because one of the things that you want to make sure you're doing is complying with court orders and that you're not violating any of them. Because when you go back in front of that judge, the very first thing that will make your judge angry is having somebody that doesn't comply with orders, because that's kind of showing disrespect to the court. So you want to always make sure you're in compliance with orders. So if you have orders that are loose, let's say that are very vague, that person probably has the freedom to call the children when they want to, if you didn't really put that in your orders. Now, if your orders don't say anything, then they don't have that freedom. But if your orders say either parent can communicate freely with the children on the other parent's parenting time, or, within reason, that's a famous word. And, reason to me and you and the narcissist are all totally different things, right? So that kind of vague language becomes problematic. If you have not gotten court orders yet, then this is a great topic for you to be watching, because I am here to tell you that you need specific guidelines. You need a window. I usually tell people, ask for a window of time that works for you. Ask for a time limit be set that's age appropriate based on your children. If you have older children, define if texting is okay or not. All of those kinds of things. Okay. Now, when you are dealing with this narcissistic person, usually what will happen is, it's usually in situations where people have more vague orders. When things are really restrictive and you have those windows and you have times, or you even have orders that go through the parenting app, which I'm seeing more and more now as parenting apps are kind of expanding their services. What we're having now is the ability to record through the parenting app and record calls, including calls with the children. So any of those kinds of things are obviously very helpful, but usually where people are having trouble is when they either have vague orders or you have teenagers, because you can't really control it at that point, right? Like, you can control a 3-year-old. They can't come use the phone without you as a general rule. A 13-year-old is a totally different can of worms. And a lot of times they have their own phone, they have their own access, and it's problematic. Okay. This is one of the things to think through when we start talking about cell phones for the kids, because what happens is, if the cell phone is on your account, then you have control over that cell phone, right? And if it's not on your account, that you can't control, you can control the device when it's in your house, but you don't have control over the device in general. Like, you can track it, you can do all those things if it's on your account. So if it's on the other person's account and they're providing the child with the cell phone, then they can probably track that, right? And we don't really usually want to be tracked by that person. So the first thing that I tell parents is, look, you don't have to allow the child to utilize that phone on your parenting time. I have parents where the child comes into your world, and I've not had a judge say anything negative about this that I'm aware of at this point. Okay. But the child comes into your world. You are perfectly, empowered to take that phone away, turn it off, and stick it in a drawer until time for that child to transition back. Now, if you're going to do that, then you have to be careful how you're behaving when the child takes the phone and goes back to the other parent. Are you then texting or calling the child on the phone while they're back with the narcissist? Because if you are, then you've got a problem, because then it becomes an imbalanced situation, right? Because you have contact with the child when they're in the other parent's world, but now the child comes back to you, you take the phone away, stick it in a drawer, and the other parent doesn't have the ability to communicate with them. So you always have to remember that anything you do, you have to be willing for it to be done on the opposite end. Okay. So I've got one client where that's, her child is kind of in that mid range, like that 9 to 12 age range, where it's kind of like, should she have a phone? Shouldn't she have a phone? Does she really need a phone? And mom's kind of the thought process that she doesn't. And dad purchases this phone with her and sends it with her. So mom just turns it off and puts it in a drawer, and dad still has to go through mom in order to talk to the child. Now, eventually what happened is dad stopped sending the phone with the child when the child transitioned. Okay. So that's one example. Now, I have another case where the parents actually have their own cell phone in each world. This child's a little bit older, 13 to 15. Child has 2 numbers. I know that, again, that's kind of a pain, but dad doesn't want mom's phone coming to his house and being able to track the child in his world, and mom doesn't want dad's phone that he pays for coming into her world with the child and being able to track the child. So they both just use their own devices on their own time. And one of the things that I said in that situation is, look, that means that you can't contact the child, call the child, or even respond to the child calling you or texting you when the child is in the other parent's world and using that device, unless you're okay with the other parent doing the same thing when the child is in your world. And I know you might say to me, well, but I'm not overstepping. I'm not over communicating. Mine's very mild and theirs is very excessive. And I get that. But again, those kind of become things that are hard to quantify. And so you have to have really strong boundaries with a narcissist. And it's either that neither of us are going to do this, or we're both okay to do it within our own discretion. Okay. And I think that's where people kind of miss the mark sometimes, is they're like, well, but I'm not overstepping, so it's okay. No, by even communicating with the child at all in that way, you're giving the narcissist permission to communicate that way in your world. Sometimes if they're a lot older, there's just not a lot you can do. Once my children hit 16, somewhere in there, I really couldn't control the communication with their dad. Once my stepsons hit about 16 or so, we couldn't really control their communication with their mom. Now, fortunately, I don't think it was really super excessive in either case, but it does kind of get beyond what you have the ability to control. But if that child is coming and saying, well, the other parent, the narcissistic parent, says this or that, or said to tell you this or that, or whatever, you can draw that boundary and say, I'm going to take the phone away if you think the child's being inappropriate, or it's okay to communicate to the other parent. Please do not send messages through the child. If you need to communicate with me, please do it through the app or through email or whatever method that you guys use. Okay. And if you don't have court orders on any of this, it's fine for you to draw a boundary. If your child's been on the phone with the other parent in their room for an hour, it's fine for you to go in after a 15-minute window, even 30-minute window is, I think, very generous, even for a teenager, and say, hey, you need to get off the phone now. We have things going on and things that, that we're going to do. It's time for dinner, or it's time for you to do your homework or whatever it is. So you do have to draw those boundaries. You can't be afraid to draw those boundaries. And sometimes the child will get angry. And guess what? You have to let the child get angry. If you're a parent, your child is going to get angry at you for one issue or another. So you can't back away from these issues any more than you back away from any other issue that you're disciplining the child over. Okay. But we don't want to put the child in the middle of it as much as we can avoid that. We want to try to go directly to the other parent, and maybe set some parameters or say, I know that you would like to speak with the children during my parenting time. That's fine. However, we do have other activities going on in the household. Could we please agree to a window of time that works for you, 4 to 6 or 5 to 7 or whatever? Give a couple choices. I always say that with narcissistic people, to where you're kind of putting that out there. And then, you know what? If they come back and they say something like, no, they're my kids, I can talk to them whenever I want to, I don't need your permission, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? Now you just got ammunition from them to go into court and ask for certain parameters to be set, because they've shown that they don't respect any kind of boundary that you set. But again, you got to be willing to follow the same boundaries from your perspective. Okay. I think that's the big thing. So you want to, have appropriate consequences for the children. You want to eliminate the device from the other parent, or at least restrict the usage. You can also say no phones between this time and this time each evening, or no phones during whatever. And you know what? A lot of parents, myself included, a lot of times it's kind of lazy parenting, but sometimes I just didn't want to fight with the kid, and I didn't bother. But that's not good, right? Like, if we're on our toes and we want to be a good parent, we need to be consistent, and we need to follow through, and we need to set those restrictions. And you know what? The child might not understand. They might be like, well, why? I'm not doing anything. You don't want to bring in, oh, well, the other parent is utilizing it to, you don't want to put the children in the middle. You want to just say, you know what? It's not good for you to be on your device all the time. And this is going to be our nightly routine, and maybe you have a little like lockbox of some kind that everybody in the family puts their, cell phone in, or something along those lines. Trying to get creative about things that you can do and you can apply across the board. And again, they might be angry for the first little bit or whatever, but I guarantee you, if you have them put their phones away and you engage in some other activity like, board games or pizza night with your friends, or this is whatever. I did all kinds of creative things over the years to keep the children focused on family activities and not focused on the other parent and the other parent's world. Okay. So you got to be willing to do things to pull that back in and to be able to have that interaction with them. I hope that's helpful. If you would like to learn more tips and techniques for dealing with these kinds of situations, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There is information on that page where you can learn more about my group coaching programs, my one-on-one coaching programs, and figure out which one will fit you best. I'll see you guys next time.